Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the Scripts and Character Encoding Virtual Open House event. My name is Unicode Standard, and I'll be the moderator for today's event. As a reminder, this session is being recorded and will be posted to the Unicode Consortium YouTube channel. So use the chat box for questions or comments to the team. Keep your camera on during the session if you can, but if you're shy, we understand. We'll spend a few minutes hearing from Lorna and Rusbe, and then after that, we'll have the rest of the hour for Q&A with them. Let me introduce you to our virtual open house team. Rusbe Pornader is the vice chair of the Unicode Script Ad Hoc Subcommittee. Lorna Evans works for SIL and is a longtime Unicode proposal author. Karen Dawson is the Community Engagement and Events Manager at Unicode. And I am the vice chair of the Community Engagement team at Unicode. Rusbe, can you introduce the Unicode Standard and the Script Ad Hoc for those who are unfamiliar?
Sure. Hi, everybody. So the Unicode Standard is the backbone of textual information interchange on every electronic device. It's a standard that assigns a number, which we call a code point, and properties to every letter or symbol that we need to send or receive. Phones, computers, and everything in between use those numbers to communicate or store our textual information in a standard way. So the text you send from an Android phone, for example, can be received and displayed just fine on a computer. So the Unicode Standard can still be improved. So there's an active community of volunteers extending and maintaining it. The decisions about changes and additions to the standard are formally made by the Unicode Technical Committee. But proposals for new letters and symbols, except for emoji and Han ideographs, first go through a group of experts called the Script Ad Hoc. At the Script Ad Hoc, we help improve and screen proposals for the Unicode Technical Committee and make recommendations to it so the committee can make more informed decisions about new characters and scripts.
Okay, great, thank you. Lorna, would you like to say a few words about SIL?
Yeah, SIL is a nonprofit linguistic organization, and our work typically includes academic research, which can include linguistic analysis of the language, anthropological research, translation, and literacy work. And we often assist language communities in developing their own orthographies. So I'm involved in the language technology side of things, where we're working to make sure these communities have the tools to support their writing systems. And this includes creating fonts, keyboards, language tagging, working with CLDR on exemplars, etc. So in this role, I found myself needing to get characters and/or scripts encoded in Unicode. And over time, I started doing proposals back in, 2004 or something. And over time, I found that some of the documentation in Unicode also needed clarifying. So I've gotten involved in helping with that as well, with documentation. And becoming more involved in the Unicode community, I currently participate in the Script Ad Hoc subcommittee meetings, which meet monthly, and the editorial committee, which meets biweekly. Thank you and welcome.
All right. Thank you to Lorna and Rusbe for your introductions, and thank you all for those who submitted questions prior to the event. Let's get started with the Q&A. Okay, so our first set of questions are about encoding scripts. We have a question from Enoch Stokes saying, how do I get my script into Unicode? And we have a question from LM Marley saying, what are the different steps of encoding a new script? So who wants to take that?
So Lorna, do you want to take that?
We'll show some links at the end of the presentation on for where to go for character proposals or for a whole script. There's some templates that we have on the website. If you're submitting one character, it's a lot less complex than a script, because you're wanting to fit into the script that character is going to be encoded in. So if it's a Latin character, you're wanting to get that encoded into the Latin script and follow the proposal document or the proposal template. Latin characters, you're wanting to make sure you got uppercase, lowercase pairs, and all the properties that need to be involved with a character. Might be for an orthography, which is what I'm primarily interested in, but it also could be a symbol for something else. We're primarily interested in text encoding. If it's got markup, we aren't interested in encoding something that is actually markup. For scripts, well, for any proposal, we need evidence of usage. We need samples of it being used by multiple people, not just one person who invented it. And we need to see that it's used more widely than just one or two instances. I have a character that I've been sitting on for 10 years because I only know one person using it, and I haven't been willing to propose it. So I don't know, Rispa, do you want to talk more about scripts?
What you said is interesting about more than one people and more than a small community sometimes using it. It's basically, I wanted to emphasize the point that Unicode is a standard for interchange of information. So basically, anybody who wants to have a character in Unicode must show that there's a need for interchange of the character. Basically, that's the gist of it. That's the important aspect of it. So by providing examples from various people, from various authors, basically, you would be able to show something like that. So that was, I think that's the important part of it. And I think it's going to be a question for a lot of people going for that. About scripts, generally, I would say that proposing a whole script could be rather difficult. It could be very time-consuming, and we have a few people who have over the years have become experts in this, Lorna included. But it's a project, and you basically need to do a very deep dive, provide as much information as possible about the script, and sometimes even figure out what we call an encoding model, which is basically figuring out how the different aspects of the scripts work together as characters. So if you're proposing a script from South Asia, for example, typically they have complex shaping behavior, and you need to be familiar with how other similar scripts work in Unicode in order to propose them. And what happens usually is after you propose them, we at the Script Ad Hoc look at it, and we will provide rather comprehensive feedback so you can improve your proposal, and it would have a much better chance of being approved by the Unicode Technical Committee.
And it is important to work with the Script Ad Hoc, since the members of Script Ad Hoc are familiar with different script models. They may have other ideas than you're even aware of that might work better. So it's best to have interaction with the Script Ad Hoc and be willing to hear.
Okay, great. Our next question is on the topic of encoding symbols. It's submitted by Jory Pomerantz, and I think it might be dovetailing your previous answers. The question is, what is the process for submitting a new symbol?
I can try. Basically, this is very, again, very similar. We're going to have some links that basically let you fill in basically the forms that can get you to a proposal if it's an established symbol. If it's a symbol you just invented, you need to go and get people to use it. Basically, make it widespread before you can submit it to Unicode. But if it's a symbol that's already been used, for example, if it's a math symbol, let's say, that we have missed for some reason in Unicode, go gather evidence that this is used in various mathematical papers, then come to us with that proposal, and we will definitely consider it.
Okay. And we have a question from the chat from Philippe Meyer. The question is, are there any official fonts associated with the Unicode standard? What do you think about the Noto Sans fonts developed by Google?
Lorna, do you want to take this?
I'll take a stab. We don't have any official fonts that the Unicode charts are made up by fonts that we've been given permission to use, but we don't have permission to redistribute those fonts. So that is not an official font for anybody else to use. The Noto Sans fonts are great in that they support almost every script that's encoded in Unicode. I think there's one or two that maybe not. And so they're certainly available, many other fonts. Just have to search for them, I guess. There is a web page on the Unicode site, and Debbie, maybe you can help, that does link to some fonts.
Yeah, I would like to add that I'm also a fan of Noto fonts. I was lucky enough to actually have participated in developing them when I was at Google. So I really like the project, and I think some of the people who are actually working on it are also on this call. So Simon, who just pasted something in the chat, is one of the people in charge of the Noto font project. So I would say, as a contributor to Unicode, I would recommend the Noto fonts, but formally in Unicode, we don't have any official fonts, as Lorna said.
So I have posted a link in the chat to a page that does link to many fonts, but certainly not all the scripts.
Great. And our next question actually nicely follows from this. It's also on fonts, submitted by Jacob Ford. What's something you wish font designers or typesetters understood better about encoding?
Very hard question. I don't even know where to start. What I can say is read the standard itself too. I would say for sometimes I would see fonts that are just based on Unicode charts, and I would have liked them to have a much closer understanding of the Unicode standard before they designed it. So read as much of this Unicode standard itself as possible. I know there's a lot, but be extremely familiar with it. And sometimes it even helps to go and find the original proposal that led to encoding a character or encoding a script. It may not be exactly what got encoded at the end. The standard may actually be different, but there's always good examples and good background about them in those. So I would say, in short, do your research, do as much research as possible, especially if designing a font for a minority or historical script. Lorna is also a font designer, I believe, so she would have probably better advice.
Well, my first comment is to go read the relevant Unicode chapter on that particular script, just like Rizba has said. I think there's a lot of information in there. I do have more comments. I don't know how much I should say, but for Latin script and Cyrillic, implement combining mark positioning on every base character that you can, because you'll be surprised which minority or smaller language group supports combining marks on bases. I find a lot of fonts are implemented for majority languages like European languages, and they leave out some of the other languages. I think code point decisions have consequences. Make sure that you understand how the script works and the code points that you should be using. Don't pull in a Cyrillic code point into, if you're just implementing a Latin font, don't pull in something from another script. Don't implement PUA code points as an easy way to implement a glyph variant. Learn how to implement stylistic sets or stylistic variants or something. And learn about decomposition and composed character sequences and canonical equivalences. Lastly, I would say design for the user community and not the designer community. Don't just choose a font based on its pretty design. It's more important for the font to render properly. And lastly, fonts aren't the only thing. Keyboards are important too. You want to be able to output the correct characters for that language.
Thank you. Our next question is about funding. This comes from Simon Charwi. Is there funding to support script developers to provide Unicode more evidence for script use cases?
So my understanding is you basically need to find your own funding, although, and there are various institutions in different countries that may support such projects. Unicode itself also has some funding for very specific projects. I'm not personally very familiar with that. We may have something in the notes, I'm not sure. Lorna, do you know more about this?
Not really. I know that some script proposals have been, oh, sorry, getting distracted. Script Encoding Initiative has helped some script proposals, but you would need to go to the Script Encoding Initiative page to see if they would accept anything. Yeah, funding is not something I've been involved in. I know that we've just had to do our own research.
Yeah, Unicode itself is going to be very difficult to. There is a Unicode initiative for specifically. I think it's been in the past used to support, for example, the Mayan writing system and things like that. But it's a very specific project, and I guess people. I think it's partially funded through the adaptive character in Unicode, but I think none of us are best suited to answer that question, really.
And the other thing is, if there is conflict in how different parties are wanting to encode a script, Unicode has gotten involved and pulled together ad hoc committees or meetings in order to come to consensus on that proposal. An example would be the Mongolian, and I can't remember, Bruce, but if you think of others that Unicode has ended up having to pull together meetings in order to come to some consensus.
Yeah, over time, this has happened a lot when you have conflicting proposals or conflicting scripts, but that's basically, again, Unicode people kind of volunteering their time and resources to help sort out. So it's happened that for certain scripts, we have ended up, after we receiving conflicting proposals, we have ended up spending a lot of time and effort writing a kind of a reconciliatory proposal, trying to advance the script or the writing system.
Our next question is about finding communities. This comes from Oreen Yusuf. And it is, hold on. Does Unicode actively search for new script communities?
So the short answer to that is no. We have a long backlog of scripts we know about, both minority scripts and historical scripts, that specifically the Script Encoding Initiative, which is a close ally of Unicode, run by Dr. Debbie Anderson, knows about, and they try to find volunteers or experts to write proposals about. And based on availability of resources and availability of experts, basically news and priorities basically of the various communities, new script proposals come from the Script Encoding Initiative and similar projects. But basically, mostly because most Unicode people are volunteers and have kind of relatively limited time and energy, we don't get to actively seek and find user communities to help with. Although I think also SIL does some of this work, right, Lorna?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Our next question is about proposals for languages without orthographies. So this comes from Adeshina Ayeni. What are the processes involved in proposal writing for a language without an orthography?
The orthography does need to get established before you would want to submit a proposal for something. Kind of depends on if you're wanting a Latin script orthography, that you're just wanting help figuring out the orthography. There's a technical note 19 that talks about how to make some decisions on what Latin script characters to choose, including what are some bad choices and what are good choices. So technical note 19 is helpful for Latin script. If you're trying to decide about a script for a particular language, a lot of times it'll depend on what script is being used as the majority in that region. And it may be a language wants to align themselves with that script, or it may be that they don't want to align themselves with that same script. If they're in Arabic speaking parts of the world, it may choose to use Arabic font script. So it just kind of depends on what people are wanting. I don't know if you have more to add, Rizbe.
Yes. So if your language doesn't have an orthography yet, of course you would need to make an orthography for it in order to be able to use it on various written technology devices. What I would recommend is if you're inventing an orthography, try to use existing Unicode characters as much as possible. A lot of people go and invent either a whole new script or new characters for an existing script. And of course, if they get wide established usage, we will add them to the Unicode standard. But it's going to take some time to get them added to the Unicode standard, then some more time for them to get added to fonts, some more time for them to get added to keyboards, find their way into the various operating systems. So it's going to be years before your kind of newly invented script or newly invented character finds its way to computer devices. It's much better if you use existing characters that are widely supported for your new orthography, if you're inventing a new orthography. But generally, you need to start by inventing an orthography, and there's also various good ways to do an orthography and various bad ways to do an orthography. And as Lorna recommended, we have some technical notes on this, but basically you need to study different orthographies and understand what's a good orthography and what's was not in order to have a successful orthography.
Very interesting. Our next question is about script name changes. So this comes from Harris Mowbray. Can we change the name of a script block? And he says he's asking about in regards to changing the name for Osage.
So the character names, specifically in Unicode, we have a stability guarantee that we're not going to change character names if the characters are already encoded and published in the standard. The script name is part of the character name too. And we have had cases in the past where we somehow corrected the name as an alias. So for example, we had traditionally called the script Bengali, but these days it's preferred by the user community to call it Bangla. So in our documentation, we refer to the script as both. We provide both names, and when we talking informally about the script, we try to use the name preferred by the user community. When we are forced to use our, I would say, traditional names, we may say Bengali, for example. So if any script in Unicode has a better name that we may need to use, you can provide information about that, about the user, why the user community prefers that, for example, or if the academic community prefers that, information about that. And we can basically add information about that to the standard itself. But it's not like we can remove all references about an old name from the standard and replace it with a new name. It's going to be both names kind of coinciding in the standard. Lorna, do you want to add something to this?
Yeah, the charts aren't going to be changed as far as the name, but we often add a note like Bengali is also called Bangla and sometimes called Assamese or whatever, and Oriya is now preferred to be called Oriya, and New Dailu script is also known as Sichuan Vanadai. So there are examples of precedent, but we don't actually change the chart name itself. And the chart name, I believe, comes from ISO 15924. So that is that right?
And not 15924. It's something we established when we decided to encode the character. Okay. So yeah, 15924 can also be changed. So just for people who don't know, ISO 15924 is a standard for naming the scripts. So it assigns names and codes to scripts. And we have a close collaboration with that standard. And we use that standard in the Unicode character database. But I think there's also a policy in that standard that they can add more names. In Unicode, we are kind of tied to the name of characters because of our stability policy.
Interesting. And there's a follow-up comment. I just wanted to interject. I've heard people describe maybe a different way that users can think about this, which is that they can think about the name as really an identifier, like a computer identifier, something that's unique, rather than truly the name, the official name of something. But we have a follow-up chat comment kind of on this topic from Karan Mishra. And he says, I wonder what the strong arguments are in favor of name stability, because in technical computing, we rarely use the name of a character as a stable way to recall a character, because that's where we use the code point.
Okay, this is a very interesting question. It's getting into the technical aspects of why, historical aspects of why we're doing this. But basically, this came to us because Unicode is not a standalone standard. And we have another standard that is closely tied with Unicode in the ISO world, called ISO IEC 10646, which is the ISO international standard for information interchange. And it's synchronized with Unicode. It's been years of collaboration between Unicode and ISO 10646. And when ISO 10646 came around, it was unifying a lot of different character sets that had various different kind of characters. It was now a universal standard that included all of those things. And the way for these other character sets and 10646 or Unicode to have a relationship with each other was through these character names. So the character names mostly came from various old character sets, legacy character sets that had this specific name. And so if the name was identical in Unicode and those character sets, you would know that this is the same character. So if something was called Latin capital letter A, you would know that this is the same character in those standards. So these names in the ISO world became very stable identifiers. It wasn't that important originally for Unicode, but because Unicode needed to synchronize with the ISO standard, basically we somehow inherited this rule that the names are very, very important. And as you said a while ago, they have become basically identifiers in computer code. So in some programming language, you may refer to a character by its character name as an identifier, and that would get you to a more readable code instead of 4-digit hexadecimal code, for example. But anyway, it's way late to be able to change those rules. And so we are stuck with the names. I wanted to also note that there are cases when we find out we made a mistake in the name. So for example, a typo in the name, and we have a mechanism for those very rare cases to correct the name. But this is not some license to go and change a lot of names as we wish. It's for very specific cases. When we made a bad mistake in a name, we can provide a correction. The old name doesn't go away, but we basically assign a new alias to the name that this is the better way to refer to this character. I'm getting too much into the details, to the technical details. It's probably not interesting for a lot of the audience.
But that was a wonderfully thorough answer, so appreciate it. Yes. Our next question comes from the chat from Enoch Stokes. Should a new script be copyrighted or patented, or is there no concern of rapid adoption and monetary benefits, as in the case of Xavier and Deseret?
This is a hard one. So first of all, we're not attorneys, we're not lawyers. We can't really advise on that. But what we can tell is those are barriers for adoption. So if there are legal restrictions on the script or a character or something, it's going to have a hard time finding its way into Unicode, and it's going to have a hard time getting implemented by others. So if you're inventing something and you're hoping that it becomes widespread, I would say don't do those things. Lorna, do you have something to add?
Totally agree with you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. There's a question that came from the chat that was already answered. I'll just mention what the question is for the benefit of others. The question was, if I use the Unicode standard in a scientific publication, how do I cite Unicode, or how do I reference it? This is from Philippe Meyer, and Robin Leroy answered it. There is a section in the Unicode standard, unicode.org/version/pound references, and it indicates how you do all that. So there's a link for that. Thanks for that question. Our next question comes from Padum Egodawata. How does Unicode deal with local politics and cultural sensitivity?
Lorna, do you want to try this?
So we do expect that any proposal for a character or a script to have either historical or academic or modern user community who will participate in the proposal process. The proposer doesn't necessarily have to be the user community, but they need to have input from the user community. That's very important. So that would be the cultural. If there are political concerns, UTC carefully navigates that process. So that's all I have to say.
I would say that basically whenever these aspects come into the picture, everything becomes extra complicated. But we have also learned through these years, it's been decades of Unicode developing. We've learned how to handle them as best as we can, and as aware of the community and as caring about the community as we can. So at the end, our goal is to serve the various user communities who want to use their writing system on computers. So that's been a goal shared by almost everybody in Unicode. So the cultural sensitivities are basically just part of it. And we've learned our lessons in a lot of different ways. But at the end, we're also technical people. We're people who are trying to make sure these things work technically on a cell phone or a computer or in such an environment. And we have really learned well how to get a script technically working on these things. So there are certain times that a certain member of a community or a certain group in the community may feel strongly that their script needs to be encoded a certain way. Sometimes those things are possible. Sometimes we have worked with them to get them to work that way. Sometimes that's very hard, or actually would not benefit the long-term interests of the user community. And we have also said those things, and we have encoded scripts, for example, a certain way that would work better on a computer. So in a way, we should be thought of as a technical kind of community who wants to enable the user community to be able to interchange their texts.
Our next question is about emoji from Yale Fox, how to get an emoji encoded.
The short answer is there's a page on the Unicode website that talks about this, goes into very detail about how to write a proposal for emoji. But this meeting is not about emoji. We're focusing on the scripts and symbols. The script ad hoc basically focuses on scripts and symbols. For anything emoji or related to Han ideographs in East Asia, basically, we're hoping we will have other meetings in the future that talk about them.
Okay, and are there Unicode subcommittees that also attend to those topics that you just mentioned?
Oh, yes, of course. So the script ad hoc is just one of the subcommittees in Unicode. There's an emoji subcommittee, which basically looks at emoji. There's a CJK subcommittee, which looks at for Chinese, Japanese, and Korean characters. And there's also something called the Properties and Algorithms group that looks at properties of characters and the algorithms that the Unicode defines about how to process them. So those have different people, and I hope that in the future we can have members of those groups host such events.
Okay, great. Yeah, we look forward to having events like that. Our next question comes from chat from Vaishanta Simha, and it's a query with respect to Judeo-Arabic writing, where the Hebrew script uses special diacritics. There are quite a few listed here, like harakat, fata, dhamma, kasra, mata, and so on. Apologies for the pronunciation. And these are for different characters in old books and texts. However, using those special diacritics with Hebrew Unicode code points does not work. Thus, should separate Unicode code points be required or created for them, or could the ones in the Arabic Unicode codes point space be somehow useful for this purpose?
So this is a relatively technical question, very specific, but I'll try to answer shortly for the interest of the people here. But basically, my understanding is the existing Arabic code points should be used. We would appreciate any document trying to explain which characters and which combinations are actually used. We know about this issue, but not much. So if the person who submitted this question is an expert in the field, we would appreciate more information about this so we can either document this better in the standard, or if we need to change any properties, if we need to add any notes, etc., we can serve the community better.
Bruce, but those specific ones he mentioned are listed under Arabic script and doesn't include Hebrew. So we would need to add that.
Yeah, but my understanding is basically that the writing system uses Hebrew letters, but these diacritics. I've seen examples myself, yeah.
Yeah, so we would need to receive a document if anything needs to change.
Okay, next question from the chat. Looks like also from Philippe Meyer. You said that Unicode is more dedicated to communication, but several old and unused scripts, such as Cypro-Minoan scripts, are implemented. As a researcher in old writing systems, I'd really like most old scripts to be encoded in Unicode. For example, Rongo Rongo from Easter Island or the Indus Valley script. That's helpful for research in this field. Do you plan to continue encoding old scripts into Unicode?
Yes.
Lorna?
Yeah, we definitely are willing to encode historical scripts if they're understood. And I think that may be the holdup with Rongo Rongo, that they aren't clearly researched.
Yeah, it helps if a script is decoded. It helps much in understanding it. But we have also encoded the scripts that are not decoded in the past. So I would say if you want something in Unicode, start by researching and even consider writing a proposal. These proposals don't get themselves written. It's a volunteer who writes them, and you can be one of those volunteers. And as things go, these get basically forever. This gonna be somehow recorded and attributed to you if you get the character or the script in Unicode. So it's something that I would highly recommend. It's the enjoyable, I would say, endeavor that in order to research something and try to get into Unicode. I've done it several times myself. Lorna has done it several times, and it's humbling, I would say. Try to get something through the process, but at the end, you would see your script working, and few years down the road, it's going to work on most devices. And that's a very interesting prize of your hard work.
Especially if you can write on Facebook.
That's our next question is the perfect follow-up for this. This is from the chat from Daniel Jakob. What percentage, approximately, of the encoded scripts in Unicode comes from volunteer contributors? And perhaps that might also require your kind of perspective on what the meaning of volunteer is, or what the nature is of how you are able to contribute, or how everyone who contributes is able to contribute.
I try my hand at this, but I think Lorna would also have something to add. So my understanding is most of what we're doing at Unicode is done by volunteers. We have staff, but they're not doing technical work. They're helping mostly with the administrative work. So some people who are volunteering with the collaboration of their employer. So for example, their employer, who may be a technical company, or in the case of Lorna, a nonprofit, may allow them to spend some of their work time on Unicode stuff. Or in cases like myself, all my Unicode work is my own free time, is basically everything I do for Unicode is basically time that I decide to spend on Unicode and apart from other things in my life. So I would say almost everything done by the various committees is volunteer work. So there are people who get paid for that work, but that doesn't reduce the volunteer aspect of that work. They are still working hard. They're working a lot of hours of extra time to get things through this process and enable various user communities to have their writing system working on various devices. Lorna, do you want to add something?
Yeah, well, not really, but I think what you said is right. It's really hard to evaluate. I mean, some people have been paid by other organizations to do proposals, but in general, Unicode hasn't. So it comes down to pretty much most of them are volunteer.
Yeah, thank you. There's a participant with a hand raise, Charles Coranquier. Is this a quick question on the current topic by chance?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
So, sorry. Yeah. Hi everyone. I think so. My name is Charles Crunch, and I've been working with. I've worked with Deborah Anderson for many years, and I'm working with Orin Yusuf at the moment on trying to encode the Adinkra alphabet. It's for language in Ghana and also parts of Cote d'Ivoire. So I think the problem that we've run into is it's not much more. I know Unicode kind of require more of usage of the character, where you have someone using the character before they kind of approve it. We've written a proposal, but I think the traditional sense of, like, if you take Ghana, for instance, there is a Latin character that's being used, although it's ineffective in writing the local languages, but it's what's been used for many years. The literacy rate is high, so you don't get a situation where you can start from scratch trying to teach the character, because most people already know how to write with characters, and they don't see why they should just be writing with new encoded character. When if it's available on Unicode, they will use it, but then they just don't see why they should be handwriting it. So you kind of have that situation, and I think that's what we have with the Adinkra alphabet. We have people who are using it locally in their rooms and stuff, but you just don't have people willing to just handwrite it. You kind of have that. So you're kind of stuck in that level of, what do you do? So this is just what I wanted to post the panel, but thank you for bringing it up. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, and could you repeat again what script that was?
Yeah, the script is Adinkra alphabet. So Adinkra, if you remember Adinkra symbols from Ghana, and then there's an alphabet for it, Adinkra alphabet. I don't know, maybe a few of the panel people would probably have heard of it.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have a specific knowledge about this writing system. I don't know, Lorna, do you remember anything about this?
It just needs to make progress, I think, in the script encoding initiative. I'm not sure that there's anything we can say in this meeting about it. It needs to go through script.hoc.
Okay. Appreciate it. Our next question.
Oh, sorry, but I'm not to interrupt, but I think we already submitted it through the script.
Yes, somebody needs to follow up, but this meeting isn't the right place.
Yeah, I understand. No, I'm not looking for anything like that, but yeah. All right, thank you.
And Manish, you unmuted yourself. Did you want to say something or no?
I just because Lorna said she didn't remember that much, I do remember like a little bit, and my understanding was that currently what's been proposed is it's like there is a proposal. It needs more work. I don't know
Okay.
the status of the communication because this is before we started tracking things better on this stuff.
Okay. Okay.
But I'm gonna go and make sure we're tracking this at least.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, so for everybody, Manish is also one of the volunteers at Unicode, and he's also a member of the script ad hoc.
Great. Our next question is about encoding symbols. This is from Daniel Jakob. What criteria must be met to qualify the encoding of a nonce symbol? Nonce, N-O-N-C-E.
It's very over to you.
Okay, so nonce is, I think my understanding is something that's been only used once or something. I'm not a native speaker. Is that the meaning? Can somebody
That's
help with
correct.
that?
Well,
A
yeah. So
symbol that
okay.
occurs only
It
once.
depends
It's-
which country you live in, but yes,
Okay, okay. So
it
the
means
short,
something much worse in
okay.
the UK.
The short answer to that is you need to show that there is an interest in interchanging this character. We have encoded such things in the past, again, because the character was interesting or important. So there, I think there's a famous example of the many-eyed character in Cyrillic, for those who know what that is. So there are things we have encoded that we have only seen once in a manuscript, for example. But then, yeah, Simon just pasted it into chat. So there are those examples, but you basically need to show that there's interest for interchanging that either in the academic community or the user community or something like that. So the barrier could be passed by you showing that this is an important character, although it may have only been seen once.
Okay. I think our next question will have to be our last since we're running close to the end of our time period. So this one is about fonts, and it's submitted by Yasmin Fagihi. How can I learn about finding fonts for Arabic without dots and also Latin with all diacritics for transliteration?
I have a quick answer to that is SIL actually makes a lot of good fonts for these things. And Lorna is in charge of a font, I think, called Scheherazade New for Arabic script, which is very good. And also there are other scripts. I think Lorna may be to answer this kind of more in detail, but SIL makes some very good fonts for these purposes.
That would be if the characters are encoded. If you're wanting something that leaves the dots off, we don't create that.
So what Unicode has for Arabic specifically, we have for every character that has dots, we have a dotless version of that character too. So there's a dotless be, there's a dotless qaf, etc. And all those are also supported by the Scheherazade font that Lorna just mentioned.
Yes, and there's a link in the chat, and then we have a font called Keras and another one called Gentium. Those are good Latin fonts for covering at least all of Latin in the BMP. I'm not quite sure if we've covered all the newest ones in the SMP. But for transliteration, if that's what you're asking, Keras or Gentium would be very suitable.
Okay, great. I think it's time to wrap things up. So I'll start with a slide of links that Lorna and Ruthbay collected, and these are high-level things where you can find more information about FAQs, about submitting proposals, templates for submitting proposals for new scripts and characters. Okay, so I want to thank Lorna and Ruzbe for presenting and answering our questions in the Q&A session. It was great to hear your technical depth and your insight on all of these questions. Thanks to Karen for all the logistics leading up to today to make the event possible. Thanks for our other volunteers from the script ad hoc. So we had Debbie Anderson, we had Manish, and we had others. Craig Cornelius was also monitoring the chat. And finally, thanks to all of you in attendance for making this event a success. All of us are really pleased to see that you've been showing a lot of interest in scripts, character encoding, fonts, internationalization, and Unicode. We plan to have the recordings from this event available in the coming weeks, and we hope you stay connected for more information, future events, and can share information about this event to your colleagues. For general questions about Unicode, please visit home.unicode.org. To reach the script ad hoc team with any follow-up questions, use the Unicode reporting form, which is at unicode.org/reporting.html. And have a great rest of your day.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.